Hello and welcome to a series in which I'll try to do the Advent of Code 2021 exercises in Python. The first day of 2021, of 1st of December 2021, has an exercise. I will not read it now because it will take some time and you can read it yourself. But essentially, in this exercise, we have an input which consists of a long list of numbers. What we have to do is to check for every line of this file when the value is larger than the one in the previous line and count how many times it happens. The first line is special because there is no previous value, so basically is never counted as increasing. And the last line has no subsequent value, so it can only increase or decrease compared to the previous value. So in total, if I have 100 values, I will have 99 possible increases. So what I do first is I save my file. So I copy the whole content and save it in my system. So here I have already a folder structure ready for this exercise. In here I create in the input folder a file that I call day01.txt and I paste the content. I call it day01 because I know that there are 25 days, and so I want the alphabetical order to be the same as the numerical order, so I call it day01 instead of day 1, but that's just for because it will be nicer later. The file is there. Now I create a Python file. I call again day01.py. In this file, I will define a function called def part1, which, because there is a part 2 later, but you will see the part 2 only once you do the part 1. And I write with 3 dots. This is called ellipsis, but they are just 3 dots. And this is just an alternative to pass. It's just a fake value, a fake thing to have Python not complain about this function, because I still have to write it. And then here I simply write the if name equal main call part1. What does it mean? In Python you can import a file, and in that case the whole code will be executed, or you can just run the file directly from the shell. You can start this file or import it from some other file. The way Python knows, the way in Python you can know when your code is being imported or executed is to check the value of name. When this special variable called underscore underscore name underscore underscore is equal to this main with underscores value, it means that you are being executed. So it's a best practice in Python to never put code in your module that is not in this name thing, unless you specifically want your code to be executed whenever somebody imports your module. So here I invoke part1. What does part1 do? First, it has to read the file. So I say with open the name of the file, which is input slash day01.txt, because that's the name I use to save it. To save it. And then open requires us to specify how to open it. I want to read it, so I write R. This is not really necessary. If I don't write anything, by default it reads. And then I say as f and colon fr, which stands for file being read. This with open blah blah is a context manager, which means that everything that is indented under this code, this with open, will be able to see fr as the file being read. And most importantly, when the function exits, when we exit this block, this with block, so for example here, this print tree has no access to the file. The file is closed in the moment. This is very useful when you start to working with many files, because this with block ensures that you never leave a file open and forget about it. And on the long run, when you start building complex programs, not these small exercises, it's useful. And it's very simple to do. You basically have to do nothing. It's completely automated. Then I want to read the file line by line. To do that, there is a for cycle on the file. When I do this for line in fr, what happens is that Python automatically splits the file by lines and gives me them as strings. Now what I want to do with these strings, I want to read one by one the numbers that I get, which are here, and see if they are greater or not compared to the previous one. So I start by creating a value which is the previous one. So I say previous, the previous value initially is empty, it's none. None is just a placeholder that Python wants. That is nice to use when you have no values. Now I want to compare the content of the line, the current one, with the previous line. So I say that if the line is greater than previous, what I have to do, I have to count it. So I need another variable, which I will call increases. Initially it's 0. And I say, okay, if the line that I'm seeing is greater than previous, then increases is increased by 1, plus equal 1. This plus equal 1 is just a short way to say increases equal increases plus 1. It means increases the variable name by 1. After this, no matter what, if I add an increase or not, this line that I just saw is equivalent to the previous value for the next line. So I need to keep track every time of what I saw the previous line. So I say previous equal line. So basically, after checking the current line, I'll say, okay, before reading the next one, keep track of what I just saw, because the next line will need to compare with the current one. And here, after the full cycle, after with, I can just return the value, the number of increases. But who sees this value that we are returning? The caller, which is this code here, which is the only code that is invoking part 1. So I cannot just do part 1 as is, because nobody will see the value. I have to do a print. So I print the part 1. Now if I run the code, I can say Python 3. I can say Python 3 in Advent 2021 day 01.py, and there is an error. What does this error say? It says that I cannot apply this operator between string and none. Why is it happening? Because here we explicitly we're comparing line with previous, but when we find the first value, previous is none. So it can compare the first line that this is with the none value. I have to explicitly ask it to not do the comparison when we are at the first line, so when previous is none. How I do it? I say that this condition becomes if previous is not none, which is the way you check if something is none. You don't use equal or greater than or something like that, because none is special, so you have to say is not none, and line equal and line greater than previous. Notice that when Python sees an AND, when the first condition is false, so when previous is none in this case, it doesn't even try to do the second part. This is called short-circuiting, and this is an explicit behavior of Python, so we can use it to just ensure that this part will be never executed if the first part is false. So now I can run it again, and I see a value. And okay, I see a value 1556. So we fixed the problem. There is still another problem. which is a bit subtle in this case because the program is actually working, but the result is probably wrong. I'm not sure, but could be wrong. Why? The problem is that we are doing an comparison between numbers. We know that every line we read from this file is a number, but nothing in here tells Python that this value that is being read from the file is actually a number. Python is reading a string. In fact, if you hover the mouse, at least in VS Code, it will tell you that this line is a string. And if you don't believe it or your editor doesn't show it, you can just say print type of line. And if I run it, it will tell me explicitly that this line is a class string. Now, why is it working? Because the operation greater than is defined also for strings. So it's not wrong from the syntactical point of view, but it's wrong, of course, for the semantic, because we want to compare numbers. And the alphabetical comparison between strings that contain numbers is not exactly the same as the number. So what I do is I simply convert the line to a number before actually doing anything with it. So I say that the line value is the int of line. Int is just the operator to cast the line, so which is a string, to an integer. So it will read the string that contains a number and convert it to an integer. Now line values goes whenever I have line in this code. So I converted the line in line value, I compare this line value with the previous value, and then I assign the line value to previous. So I'm just converting to a number the line before doing anything. And if I run, I see that there is one error. So the value before was 1556 and now is 1557. Why? Because the comparison in alphabetical order of numbers in general in these cases is the same as the numerical comparison, because if a number has 4 digits, then it's the same comparing alphabetically or not. But in this list we have also numbers with 3 digits, and when we are at this line, Python will compare 999 and 1005, and alphabetically 999 comes after 1005 because it starts with a 9, but numerically of course is not. So this conversion fixes the value, and in fact if I put it in the solution, it will tell me that it was correct. You don't see it because I lost the footage of the first time I did the exercise, so that's what it. Also, there is another small thing that you may, another small problem you may encounter, which is what happens if you have empty lines in the file. If you have an empty line like this and you run the code, you will get an error. This error, invalid literal for int with base 10 \n, is telling you something a bit cryptical, but actually very common if you are used to programming. So let's try to parse it and decode what the hell Python is trying to communicate to us. Value error is just the name of the type of the error. The type of this error is a value error. This is specific for the way Python names errors. Other languages have other naming. This is just a very generic error saying that something has a wrong value. Invalid literal for int with base 10. Base 10 just means the human numbers, so the numbers that use 10 digits, which is different from, for example, binary, which is base 2, or hexadecimal, which is base 16, and so on. So it's just saying that int was trying to read a literal, so basically some text, and interpreting it as base 10. But this literal was not valid. It's not a real number. What is this literal? It is \n. What is this \n? Is a way developers and programming languages in general represent the new line character, which is what we had at line 2001. Since this character, the new line, is special because we cannot just write it on the keyboard or we go actually to the new line, we need some way to represent it so that we can write it without actually going to the new line. so we need to basically represent it without writing it. This \n, where the n stands for new line, is exactly that, is the way we represent new line when programming in Python and other languages. So what we have to do to avoid it, in the for cycle, before trying to actually parse the line, we check that is not empty, and if it is, we skip it. So we say if line.strip is equal to the empty string, continue. This strip is just a function that removes all the empty spaces, which means spaces, tabs, or new lines from the beginning or the end of a string, which is very common when you handle with data provided by humans like me. So if you strip the line and after stripping it is empty, which means that it was only made of spaces or new lines or whatever, then this line is worthless for us, so we just continue, which means we skip this iteration of the cycle. And now I can run again, and this time the code works because it's skipping the empty line. See you for the next part, day 1, part 2.